Anna Butterfield.
I'm Michael Butterfield.
And I'm Anole Song,
our Oscar expert.
Oh, sure.
Megalopolis and The Brutalist. Two films that performed so differently. How are they based on the same source material? And what maybe was even more interesting to me is why are people making films in 2024 based on this old ethical egoist's novels? How much of her philosophy do they really have? Did it contribute to how well or badly they did? And what might that say about our society? We are gonna dig into that today in this video.
Yeah.
Crazy story. It's more or less a normal story, actually.
Stay calm.
A few months ago, Anole and I were talking just after she'd seen The Brutalist for the first time. As she was explaining the plot, I was like, where have I heard this before? And found The Brutalist was based on Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead, at least loosely. But what I didn't expect was that it wasn't the only film that had come out based on an Ayn Rand novel that year. Megalopolis also had been based on The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, more or less loosely. Before we get into the concepts of the films, can you tell us about how they did perform?
Well, both of the films performed pretty differently. I'll start with Megalopolis.
One filmmaker has always been ahead of his time.
Go. Imagine today's society as a branch of civilization about to reach a dead end. Is this way we're living the only one that's available to us?
Came out 2024, last year, had really negative to slightly mixed reviews from critics and the audience. People just really struggled with understanding kind of like what the point of the film was, what the director was trying to say. It felt very convoluted and pretentious and just kind of pointless. That kind of displayed in its box office success. The original film's budget was, over $120 million. It was a really big budget film, but in the box office, I think worldwide, it only made about $14 million, which is, simple math, but pretty rough.
Tragic.
pretty rough there. It actually received like a Raspberry Award,
Francis Ford Coppola,
which is equal to the Oscars except the other direction. So it's always comparing like the worst films and the worst directors and actors in each of these categories that the Academy usually does. And then on the opposite side, The Brutalist.
These are yours, yes? Yes. All of them? Yes. Tell me, why is an accomplished foreign architect shoveling coal here in Philadelphia?
I'm afraid it is not so simple.
Audiences and critics really quite enjoyed the film. It has pretty high reviews. That film was only made for $10 million, which is quite impressive considering it's a 3.5-hour historical drama film. And it made over $40 million in the box office. And then in terms of, awards and whatnot, it got over 10 Academy Award nominations and won 3 of them in the 2025 Oscars.
And the Oscar goes to Adrian Brody.
So totally opposite receptions from everyone.
Starting with Megalopolis, what can you tell us about the plot, the characters, for those who haven't seen it? What is the story?
Right, for sure. It all takes place in New Rome, which is like a futuristic Roman Empire. And we're following this main character who's like an architect, whose name is Caesar, of course. Caesar Catalina, and he is kind of considered like a genius in this world. He, at the beginning of the film, gets like a Nobel Prize for this invention, for this building material called megalon. And this is kind of where he crafts his concept of a completely new world society that he calls Megalopolis. And so the whole story, we're following him as he's trying to build this new place and convince everyone around him that this is like exactly what they need. He's very convinced that he can like save the world from where it's currently at, which from his perspective is full of corruption and chaos and we're wasting our time kind of mentality. But he's directly faced with the mayor of New Rome named Franklin, and he is totally an advocate for like the status quo. He likes how the world is right now. He really kind of thrives off of it. Other people's greed and his own greed. So just like financially speaking, it's a lot more comfortable for him to stay where it's at right now. And then we have this third character who ends up kind of being in between them and representing like a bridge between the old and the new. And this character, her name is Julia, and she is Franklin, the mayor's daughter. And so at the beginning of the film, she's kind of like well known, she is loved by the people, and she kind of represents like order, if that makes sense. But then as she meets Caesar, she ends up falling in love with him and totally being enamored by his ideas of this future possibility. Near the end of the film, there's like this huge riot that breaks out, and it's utter chaos. And like basically the old world like falls because of how messy everything has gotten. And so he's like, hey, what about like, what about my like idea over here that I'm like almost done building? And then he ends up like kind of convincing everyone that like is actually a good idea, because it's like not like their old society even exists anymore. And so, you know, we're at the end of the movie. He has successfully finished Megalopolis. It's like everyone is kind of happy about it, I guess. And then it's like, you know, we pull out and then the movie ends, and that's like kind of a brief summary of like it of the film.
I think I do remember seeing like a funny comment about like the end scene where the baby's on like a flying carpet or something, right?
Yeah,
or the baby can stop time.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
On its own?
Or like it's like I think
on
it's like
its own.
supposed to be like a family thing, but yeah.
It's a family thing.
Like it's like a callback, but
It's Incredibles.
yeah,
The
exactly.
third Incredibles
Exactly,
movie
exactly.
that we
right.
didn't ask for.
One more thing too is like in terms of how the film plays out, it's very theme driven. And so I think this is why a lot of people actually had a hard time with this movie, but the characters are very symbolic. And they don't necessarily feel like fully fleshed out people who are relatable. It's like they're saying exactly what they symbolize like the whole time.
Yeah.
So it's like straight to the point, but it also feels like a little flat at times because it's like no one talks like that.
To the riches of my Emersonian mind.
The one that we talked about with Ayn Rand was the strong theming of characters, I think, in her writing, though I think we had heard somewhere that she did not think that was the case. Do you remember this?
Yeah, Ayn Rand did this really interesting interview where she's like,
art should never be didactic.
but then like her stories are so symbolic and like, so like just channeling her philosophy that it's kind of like, okay, sure.
Right.
But I kind of wondered that with this, if it actually did kind of capture the heart of Rand in the sense that like her characters are very symbolic.
Romantic art presents to man what he might be and ought to be.
And so even there's a ton of similarities in the sense of like those main characters. The Fountainhead, it is an architect, and you know, he ends up of course in love with some girl who's also like the daughter of somebody important like in society. And they have this really intense romance that unfolds. It has some also similarities to Atlas Shrugged in that, like in that one, the inventor, brilliant elite guy has created a special substance, a special kind of steel that is used to build like this empire. And it sounds very similar in the sense of the genre.
Right.
And he called it a fable, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like an epic drama, fable, like futuristic, utopia, like whatever, like all of these types of things that kind of encapsulate it. And so, yeah, this film's a lot more theme driven, and the next film we'll talk about is a lot more character driven. So
let's actually watch the opening scene for this film.
Totally. explosion.
I just make me feel better about my number 2. I love this.
So are you excited to
A
watch
fable.
this 2-hour movie or what?
Something about that title frame makes me think of Dracula, which doesn't.
Oh,
Coppola?
So when I see like Adam Driver standing on top of a huge building, overlooking kind of humanity in a way, and he has this godlike ability to stop time, and I was like, wow, that is fascinating. The Fountainhead opens with the protagonist, Howard Rourke, I think is his name, and he's standing on top of this like huge cliff overlooking the ocean. Spark Notes insights here, but they emphasize the sky and the ocean, and it's like they said comparing him with those things is almost like a deification. For Rand, she is like within her novels trying to create like this image of the ideal man. And as an ethical egoist, she kind of maybe takes that kind of ideal in a different direction than someone might traditionally think.
He has to hold reason as his only guide to action, and that he must live by the independent judgment of his own mind. That his highest moral purpose is the achievement of his own happiness.
Why are those the things? Because like, if her characters are similar to Caesar, I hated Caesar, and I would like never want to be friends with him. So I'm like, personally,
within ethics, and especially normative ethics, you're answering several like key questions. You're asking, first of all, like, is morality a real thing? You're asking, like, how do we know what those morals are? And then you're asking a really important question, which would be like, why should I be moral? Like, personally. So, like, picture a scenario where I, like, do everything right, but I totally suffer for it. And then picture another scenario where I do everything wrong and get away with it. Nobody knows that I'm a terrible person, but I flourish. Like, my life is amazing. Like, I have all the money. I have, everything that I could want. What compels me to choose to do the right thing here? Like, is it even good for me to be moral?
Right.
And I think that in a charitable way, Rand is also like highlighting that. Like, is it good for me to be moral? And if everyone's always asking me to give up what I want for other people or to feel bad for other people, that's how I'm supposed to live. And it's always disadvantaging me. Like, why? I don't even want to be moral at that point. So like, in a way, the way that she has advocated for selfishness is a way of salvaging the question of like, we should be moral, but this is what's moral.
Yeah, that egoistic basis for why be moral. She's saying, I think I can redescribe the moral stuff that matters through this theoretical foundation, self-interest. Now let's talk about why you should be nice at dinner, or why you should work on projects, or why you should have friends, or why you should, be married in this way, but maybe the other, whatever. And she's like, I think I can redescribe all the things that matter that way. In a sense, the most moral person would have embraced that. I'll be moral because being moral, it means being self-interested, and that makes sense to me.
Yeah, let's watch this other scene and see if we have any additional insights into either his character or anything with Megalopolis.
To create something to inspire people.
People? Oh, when have you ever even cared about people, Catalina?
Here's my plan. A city that people can dream about.
People don't need dreams. They need teachers, sanitation, jobs.
The need is to create something that lives on after a city fair, Mayor. Which is why Megalopolis will be built entirely out of the megalon, which is imperishable.
The megalon is unsafe. Concrete, and steel is safe.
Imagine today's society.
Yeah.
A branch of civilization.
They're greedy.
About to reach a dead end. Humanity as an old tree with one misguided branch called civilization. Going nowhere.
I like trees as much as the next guy, but we're not here to discuss trees. People need help, and they need it now.
That's the
Don't
daughter.
let the now destroy the forever.
We are talking about people.
That's the mayor.
People, Catalina, and how they live now.
No time to talk of people's future? Yet there's always time to convince them to use money they don't have, to buy things they don't need, to imitate people they don't like. Which makes you the chief slumlord. and the mayor of the city of nothing.
You call me that again, and I will smash your face.
Easy, gentlemen.
John Ford.
Meanwhile,
Same
my
cut,
guy
same
looks so old.
I'm confused.
So lost.
Am I on the right side?
So cool and collected when you poisoned your wife and her body disappeared. Is Megalon your miracle method made from her body? Is your poor Sunny Hope a plastic girder somewhere? A wall panel? What really happened?
Well, you were the prosecuting DA, so you know I was acquitted. And you're still a slumlord.
I am not a slumlord! You will not stay!
You little!
I will destroy you!
That's like a middle schooler moment right there.
Literally.
And you're still a brat.
Yeah, exactly.
You're still a jerk.
I will sick my slumlord dogs on you. Oh, wait. The picture, am I seeing it right? Humanity was the
Yeah.
trunk,
Homo sapiens.
Homo sapiens, and then we had civilization,
Yeah.
and off
Which
that came...
the only branch that has any words on it. You're like, what about the alternative futures, like alternative multiverse options?
Yeah,
Exactly.
where
What
is
the
that right now? How universe exclusive is he being
Yeah.
here right now? But it was civilization, and then we have poverty and just
Cruelty. I had expected
Inequality.
war. Yeah, and Homo sapien. So I'm curious about that because it does feel like it maps on to kind of the be an individual, do your thing, kind of counter to civilizational things go wrong. And that feels very Rand. I don't know how it fits with his Caesar's vision for Megalopolis, but
it's interesting because Franklin, he's almost giving a very like altruistic speech, like in a way, like,
Right.
hey, we gotta help people. They like ideas are great, but like, what about actually getting help where it's needed, like in a practical way?
Right.
And it's interesting because they in the movie chose to put it in the mouth of the antagonist.
Yeah.
And Rand does something very similar. I think it's in Atlas Shrugged, where it's like this guy's giving a very altruistic speech, but because you hate that character, it comes across as bad.
Yeah, I think he's using the whole what about the people and what about actually making solutions with what we currently have as like an umbrella or like a mask for what seems to be a very like greedy and like stubborn mentality, being guided by a very selfish thing, but also not in the way that Rand would have liked it to be if they're
Right.
the villain.
Absolutely.
But also a selfish character. So it's like that's confusing, but cool. Okay. Love.
I think one thing I always wrestle with when I think about Rand is like, how is she making this distinction, like between who can be selfish and
who
powerful
can't,
and who can't, and why is this good and this bad?
it's very easy to have these really stark pictures when you're trying to make sense of life or reality at the higher level. You're like, okay, there are good things and bad, and then like that object looks like this, so that object is bad. And it's like, wait, how did maybe objects aren't like that in a certain way? And utilitarianism, or I think her vision of Christianity, and maybe some of the socialist experiences she had these calls for sort of an ethical call, be completely about this sort of the other. Maybe completely sacrifice yourself for the state. Or maybe what God's calling you to is nothing of interest to your well-being or your growth or whatever, something like that. And that does feel like it's either of those feel like unlivable.
Something that she hates is this idea of like a sacrifice morality.
The world is perishing from an orgy of self-sacrificing.
Which is where her selfishness comes into play as the opposite of that, as a virtuous thing. Like, selfishness is good. And she kind of describes that with this really interesting illustration about love. If you're totally selfless and you come to a relationship and you're like, I could care less whether I'm with you. I could care less whether you care about me, but we're going to make this work. Nobody wants a loving relationship like that. That's not even love at all. The kind of relationship we want is one that says, like, I really want you. You benefit me. I benefit you. Like, I'm happier for being with you. This whole idea of love and selfishness, there's like several dichotomies that she creates like that, where it's like my ethical egoism is life and your, traditional morality or utilitarianism or Christianity is death. Ethical egoism is good for me. These other views are saying like I have to do things that are not good for me. And so she's pushing back on that. But she, in the process, is creating these dichotomies that are arguably false. Like, at least we would be well to ask, are these legitimate comparisons?
Right.
So is selfishness and selflessness the only options within the relationship? The only options like for love?
Right.
And it's like, well, what about unselfishness? Like, what about like, I care about my good, but I also care about your good? Like,
Right.
why isn't that on the table? Okay, we've got to dig into a little bit to Ayn Rand and Megalopolis and some similarities, some dissimilarities, some of the philosophy there, and let's dig into The Brutalist. Can you tell us a little bit about the plot?
Yeah. So The Brutalist basically follows 3 decades of this one character, Laszlo Toth. He is a Hungarian Jewish architect who at the beginning of the film, he is escaping a post-war Europe. He's a Holocaust survivor, and he's coming over to America. And there's a lot of kind of excitement and hope for this new life, this new world, developing his career in this new country. And then he has a wife, Erzsébet. There's a little bit of conflict, I think, between them of this like ambitious artist and the cost that it takes someone to be like ambitious like that. Laszlo's very uncompromising throughout the whole entire movie with his ideas. So then our last character is Harrison Lee Van Buren, and he is a very wealthy man. They actually have a very tense first interaction. Harrison's son like hires Laszlo because he sees Laszlo's work to redo his father's study. And Laszlo does it, and it's like, it's really pretty, but it's totally different than how it was. And Harrison comes home and loses it. And they don't pay him for the work that he just did. And so there's this kind of weird economic issue that now Laszlo's dealing with. Harrison and Laszlo eventually, make amends because he realizes how talented Laszlo is by seeing some of his older work through an international newspaper. He basically is like, I want you to come work for me. I want to build this community center for the people, and I want you to design it because you're amazing and blah, 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 blah. 2 hours passed. No, I'm just kidding, but kind of. So he's like working on this project, and the people who are giving him permits, the people who are building it, the people who are funding it, they're always like kind of pushing back against his idea. What if we got rid of this? What's it like? What if we got rid? And Laszlo's very uncompromising. This like accident happens to a lot of their materials. And so they have to shut down the whole project because now they have to pay for the people that got injured and all of this materials lost that was supposed to like be for the community center. And so it's like all is lost. He moves to New York City with his wife. The wife is getting sicker, and there's kind of this weird like moment where somehow Harrison gets more money or something, and he offers to have him come back to make it, but he wasn't treated super well. And he's going down this path of like obsession as well. And his wife's like, hello, like we are also still in your life, like as a relationship, and like maybe like prioritize this. So he has to like make this decision between like going back to work with Harrison, which might be questionable, but then also like his family needs support, both financially and also like literally, like emotionally. And so he ends up going back to work, and the other events that happen continue to push a almost tragic story for Laszlo, because he was so hopeful at the start, of this like American dream. It's almost like an idolized idea of that and like all that it could entail. It's almost like a harsh like reality of like this like having so much ambition, but then like the reality of making that happen. In the end, he ends up like finishing the community center. But it ends on, it's almost like a sour note of he wasn't compromising in his idea, but like at what point did he compromise like his own morality and his own like choices to make that happen? And like, was it worth it after all of that? What happened to the family? Each of them got taken advantage of in different ways. Physically, emotionally, financially, and all these things. And then there's like this really strange epilogue scene where it's like way down in the future, like, and he's like super old, and it's like an exhibit for like all the things that he made. And like a lot of people were really confused why that scene was included, because it kind of feels like a little like cherry on top, except like the ice cream has melted and you're all like devastated. But then it's like, but like he did get what he wanted in terms of like being noticed and making a name for himself in this new country. It just like the journey to get there was really hard and like tested the worth of going through all that for the sake of being like an artist or whatnot.
Let's launch into the first scene then.
Totally.
We can check it out.
Most már bizonyos vagyok, nem maradt számukra semmi itt. Menj Amerikába, és én követni foglak. Hűséges szerelmem, Erzsébet.
I don't think I'm the most like reactionary when I'm watching films, especially intros. And going into this film, I was worried because it's a 3.5-hour movie, and I was like, does anything need to be that long? Like, I was like a little bit concerned about that. But this scene like hooked me immediately. Like the soundtrack, like I did watch it in like a theater, IMAX, like little like the scene like went back. Like I was like ready to go, you know? But yeah, I had like chills watching this just because I thought it was like so moving, very symbolic, and just like, yeah, what's gonna happen next? And the full movie, I was pretty hooked. Yeah, the intermission came and I was like, it's already halfway through. It's insane.
It captures like the kind of promise that's made. Now, whether it's a true promise, I don't know, but the promise that's made in sort of America hopefulness things, that's certainly being communicated there. I thought it did a great job at getting that picture there. And that does seem to connect to kind of Rand's, maybe a little bit of Rand's sense of like America being in contrast to her socialist background.
That's one thing that is interesting. You alluded to it, but like Rand was an immigrant, came from Russia. That doesn't sound at all like either of the characters in her books. It actually feels almost more like Rand herself, which is fascinating.
I think the thing that stands out to me based off what we've already talked about the characters, the only like kind of more obvious similarity is just like the persistence of Laszlo and his idea. Just feels like it's displayed in a very different way than Caesar does, and then maybe in the way that the characters in Fountainhead as well, or character one, but yeah.
That does make me wonder if the film is doing something contemporary that Rand wouldn't have been doing, in the sense that she had this anonymity as kind of part of the ethic of her character, so that because she's portraying the ideal man, she wants every person to feel they could become that person, regardless of where they came from.
Oh, interesting.
And so she's creating the type, but
not like the personality.
Right. But we, as a modern audience, maybe connect better with Laszlo because we're like, hey, we get where he's coming from. He's actually trying to go from, well, probably he was top, then bottom, then trying to move back up.
Right.
Something to that effect. And we have sympathy for him, which actually like endears us to him.
Right.
And it makes us appreciate even his resilience in a different way. Because like you found Adam's character kind of, Caesar was like annoying.
Yeah, a little bit. Right. Yeah.
But we don't necessarily, we view this character in a sympathetic light, which is interesting. Like, is that helping move Rand's agenda better, or is it actually like
against it?
Kind of working against her? I'm not sure. I'm curious to dig more into his character, and maybe the next scene that we will watch will dig into that.
Sure. Yeah.
It is no coincidence that fate brought us together on the eve of my mother's death. I'm good at reading the signs.
Sir, I do not know what the commission entails.
We'll talk about the details at home, but you'll be well compensated. And also, you'll be given a place here on the property to live and work. I think that residing here will allow you the time and the space to conceive of it properly. And your family, should they arrive, they're welcome here too. What do you say?
I would like to draw something and present it to him.
You'd like to win the commission. All right, you can do that. It's cold. Let's return inside. Come on.
I'm curious if it like was intentionally cold and these are lines, or if it was actually just really cold the day they were filming. And so it's like, let's like mention it 7 times. I think this scene is one of the main reasons why I also mentioned it kind of feels like a savior complex dynamic, because it's super performative. It's like he brought everyone out here outside and whatnot, like a little trek to announce this amazing thing in such a format that's like, I'm amazing, if that makes sense.
Totally.
Like, it's like, I realize the potential of this artist and I'm giving back to you guys and the community.
Sure.
And also my mother's dead and this is in honor of her. Like, it's all of these little points that make you likable in theory. And it's like that shot that's like talking and then it's like the reverse and there's all the people. It's like, he's not really in a position to say no. Because otherwise it's awkward. And all these people that he just got introduced to that are, in theory, also super rich and could give him future work, we're just introduced to him, and now it's like, are you gonna do this really nice offer, by the way, because like it's for the community? And it's like, if you say no, it's like, does that now like ruin your reputation almost?
It's interesting to see this community center piece, because that actually does come up in her Fountainhead as well, where there's the opportunity to build it, and he makes them promise him that they will not change his designs. Like, he will do it, like accept the commission, and it's from somebody who is a little on the sketchy side. Like, I think he'd been burned by him before. Something almost very similar. And he's like, I will do this as long as you promise that the designs will not be changed at all in the building process. And then, of course, when he returns to check the building site, they've altered the designs while building. And so he and his female counterpart actually go and blow the building up. Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
They're like, no, I will not allow an abomination of my work to exist. Like, it's either how I designed it or nothing. And that's viewed very highly. Like, every single time he does that, it's the right thing to do.
There is a scene where they're running out of money and they like pitch lowering the ceilings a little bit because his design is like huge and like really tall. And he like loses it on like the financial manager or whatever and yells at them and is like, you're incompetent, you can't do like blah, blah, blah. But at least for me when I was watching it, it was not in a positive light. It was like, dude, you need to chill. He's compromising his morals now, even though he's not compromising his idea, because now he's kind of turning into this like rude, selfish, my way or the highway, which is more similar to Harrison, which we don't like. And he doesn't like either. So it's like you're actually becoming who you hate more and kind of not what you stand for. And his wife does not tolerate that behavior. Unlike in the book where it's like, they go blow up the building. It's like, she's like, Leslie, what are you doing? Like, if anything, he's like losing some integrity. Yeah. Because he's like now only like hyper. Yeah.
Sure. Right. That's interesting.
It does seem that to kind of hold this super independent vision of just pursuing what's always filtered through the question of what is to your own self-interest doesn't quite seem to comport with my experience of life. And I don't know if it really would appeal to people. And I don't know if like things like the empathy that we're drawn to in The Brutalist towards his character, like does that run counter to it? I don't know. This is kind of getting back to the film question. Like, why does this movie work or not? Is anybody viewing the movie as in line with her thinking? Probably not a lot of people, because they're not a lot of the audience that like the movie are officially Randian in thought. I don't know. I'd be curious. I don't know. You liked it, no? Yeah, like, and would you have to be to like the movie? Right. And I mean, you're asking the question: is maybe The Brutalist isn't so much really doing Rand's view, even though there's certain, maybe more than superficial, but you know, does it work or whatnot?
So going back to the main thing that we have been trying to kind of parse out here is, are they similar to her in the story? Are they similar to her philosophy? And did that contribute to how they did? And I personally do think, even the more that we've talked about The Brutalist, that it doesn't necessarily feel that it's capturing her main characters or even necessarily some of her emphases and ethics necessarily. I think Megalopolis is doing that a lot more. And at a meta level, it's doing it in a similar genre, like her tone kind of thing, with it being a fable and her stuff being very, type oriented or something. I think that The Brutalist feels like is borrowing from some of our modern sensibilities. The way that we are drawn to it is not necessarily the Randian pieces of it. I don't know that that says that the world isn't ready to convert to ethical egoism yet or anything like that. But I do think that it just shows that people are still grappling with something more Randian as opposed to like a more traditional view. And I think it'd be interesting to hear what people watching it think. If there was big things that we missed, big themes from either the book or the movie, and if someone would draw a different conclusion, and if so, why? Yeah, I super appreciate you guys having this conversation, and I feel like it's been a fun journey.
Totally. Yay!
Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.